Mara is lying still, but nothing inside feels still. The room is dark, the phone is face down, and the day should be finished, yet tomorrow has already walked in and taken a seat on her chest. She can see the conversation before it happens. She can feel the disappointment before anyone speaks. She can almost hear the old result arriving early, as if the future has permission to torment her before it exists. This is where the before-sleep doorway matters, not because sleep is magic in a childish sense, but because the last identity carried into night often becomes the first atmosphere of morning. If the final rehearsal is fear, the body wakes prepared for fear. If the final rehearsal is the wish fulfilled, something deeper begins to learn a different home. Here is the question to carry into the next few minutes. What changes when the final rehearsal of the night is no longer fear, but fulfilled identity? Do not rush past it. The answer will show itself in small places. The automatic sentence, the private reaction, the moment proof is absent, and the way the body behaves when the old state asks to be obeyed again. A Neville-style reading of this moment begins with consciousness as the place where identity is accepted before experience is interpreted. The state occupied within becomes the atmosphere from which life is interpreted and met. That does not remove responsibility. It gives responsibility a deeper starting point. The mistake is trying to force the world to change while keeping the old state untouched. A person may repeat beautiful words and still feel like the same frightened self underneath. Then every method becomes pressure. Every silence becomes a verdict. Every delay becomes a secret accusation. The practice must go deeper than words. Tomorrow does not get first authorship. The state carried into sleep does. First movement, separate fact from identity. The fact may be a number, a silence, a memory, a tired body, or an unfinished result. Identity is the meaning the mind attaches to it. A fact says what appears. Identity says who you are because of what appears. Neville's practical genius is found in refusing to let appearance define being. For Mara, the outer circumstance looks ordinary. Stay with the bedroom for a moment. The room did not change first. The inner rehearsal changed first. That is the first turn in this lesson. If the night has been used to predict loss, then the night can also be used to remember completion. The next move is simple, but it is not casual. We are going to separate sleep from surrender and make it a doorway into command. There is no thunder, no dramatic sign, just bedroom ceiling at 1:17 a.m. Yet the inner event is enormous because a tomorrow that has not happened yet is already making the chest tight. This is where manifestation work either becomes fantasy or becomes discipline. Fantasy tries to escape the moment. Discipline chooses the state inside the moment. A safe way to say it is this: the inner state changes perception, posture, action, patience, and emotional availability. Those changes can alter how life unfolds, but the practice should not be sold as a guaranteed external result by a deadline. It is more intimate and more demanding than that. It asks who you are willing to be before proof arrives. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. The first exercise is a pause. Do not rush to affirm. Do not rush to explain. Put one hand on the body if needed and name the old state plainly. This is the state that believes the outside world is cause. Naming it creates distance. The state can be observed, and what can be observed does not have to be obeyed. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. Then choose a sentence that belongs to the fulfilled identity. Make it natural. Make it short. Make it something the nervous system can hold for 10 seconds without turning it into theater. For this episode, the sentence could be, I enter the fulfilled state before the world answers. The exact words matter less than the inner shift they carry. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work. Ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. Notice how the body argues. It may say, but look at the evidence. It may say, remember last time. It may say, this is irresponsible. Do not hate the argument. Doubt often learned its language from pain. But pain does not get to become permanent law. The fulfilled state can hear fear without letting fear govern. Neville's language around assumption points to occupancy. You do not merely think about a state, you occupy it. Occupancy means the state becomes the place from which the next ordinary action is taken. You send the email from it. You close the laptop from it. You wash the cup from it. A person can test this without making a religion out of strain. Pause where the pressure is most convincing. Let the scene be ordinary, dark room and quiet phone. Then ask, not as a slogan, but as an inward diagnosis, what state is trying to become natural here? The answer will usually be exposed by the body before the mind admits it. The jaw tightens, the stomach argues, the breath becomes shallow, and the old identity says, see, this is who we are. That is the exact place to practice. Not later, not when conditions are perfect, but there, where imagination has been secretly rehearsing the unwanted result. You answer silence from it. The spiritual practice becomes embodied. This is why the night room becomes a small theater where tomorrow can be rehearsed differently. The image matters because the mind understands pictures before it obeys arguments. When the picture changes, the body often softens. When the body softens, action stops smelling like desperation. The same practical step can be taken from lack or from fulfillment, and the two steps are not the same step inwardly. A second exercise is revision without drama. Look at the moment today where the old self took command. Revisit it for a breath, then change the inner authorship. See the same scene, but let the fulfilled self stand there. Hear the same words, but let them land in a different identity. There is also a mercy in this teaching. It does not ask Mara to become perfect before practicing. It asks for one honest return. When night has been a courtroom, the old state is revealed, not condemned. Revelation is useful because it shows the exact place where imagination has been spending its power. The new state is not built by hating the old one. It is built by withdrawing consent from the old one and giving consent to the end. Revision is not denial of the day. It is refusal to let the day train tomorrow's state. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. A third exercise is the end state question. Ask, if this were already resolved in consciousness, what would be unnecessary right now? Maybe the extra checking would be unnecessary. Maybe the apology would be unnecessary. Maybe the mental argument would be unnecessary. Whatever becomes unnecessary reveals where the old state has been spending energy. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. Then remove one unnecessary behavior for 1 hour, not forever. 1 hour. Let the phone stay down. Let the number be a number. Let the mirror be a mirror. Let the silence remain silence. In that hour, practice being the person who has already accepted the inner end. The hour becomes a laboratory of assumption. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work. Ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. The key is not emotional perfection. A person can feel a tremor and still choose the state. A person can feel old fear and still not hand it the microphone. The fulfilled self is not always euphoric. Sometimes it is simply steady enough to stop betraying itself for evidence. This is where many people misunderstand living in the end. They imagine it means acting as if practical life no longer matters. But living in the end often makes practical life cleaner. You still make calls, you still pay attention, you still plan. The difference is that action is no longer a bargain for identity. The correction is gentle but exact. Do not fight the old state as if it has independent power. Name it, withdraw authority from it, and choose the state implied by the fulfilled desire. In this lesson, Mara is not trying to hypnotize the world. Mara is learning to stop hypnotizing the self with yesterday's evidence. That distinction keeps the work mature. It leaves room for practical action while refusing to let practical action become panic wearing a responsible face. It is an expression of identity. For Mara, the turning point is small. Nobody else sees it. The shoulders drop slightly. The breath stops chasing proof. The old story still exists, but it no longer feels like the only room available. That small internal movement is not small at all. It is the first evidence that the state has changed. The mind may ask for a guarantee. Give it a practice instead. Guarantees make the nervous system greedy and frightened. Practice makes the nervous system available. Practice says, I can return, I can choose again, I can stop letting the outer scene become the author of my inner life. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. Another way to apply this is through inner speech. Listen to the sentence that appears when pressure rises, not the sentence you perform when you are trying to be spiritual. The automatic sentence. The unguarded sentence. That sentence reveals the state that has been rehearsed. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. Replace it with a sentence that does not beg. Do not say it like a magic spell. Say it like a person remembering their address. I know where I live inwardly. I live in the end. I live from the wish fulfilled. I return to the assumed state now. Calm words spoken from authority often go deeper than loud words spoken from panic. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work. Ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. If the topic touches money, love, timing, health, work, or a body condition, keep grounded wisdom close. Keep skilled help, honest communication, planning, medical care, legal advice, and practical responsibility in their rightful place. Neville-style inner work concerns the state from which life is met. It does not excuse neglect. It restores cause to consciousness. The fourth exercise is before sleep. Review the day without punishment. Find the moment the old state won. Revise it gently. Here is the first self-audit. When pressure rises around before sleep doorway, what sentence appears before you have time to edit yourself? That sentence is a doorway. If it says, I am behind, I am unwanted, I am unsafe, I am never chosen, or I am running out of time, do not decorate it. Do not shame it. Hear it clearly. Then replace it with a sentence that belongs to the state you claim to occupy. The replacement should be short enough to remember when emotion is loud. Then create one imaginal scene that implies the desired state is natural. Keep it short enough to feel. A hand squeeze, a relieved breath, a quiet sentence from someone, a room entered with belonging. Let the scene imply, not explain. Do not make the scene a mental movie that strains the forehead. The deeper mind often accepts simplicity more easily than spectacle. One clear imaginal detail, felt softly, can be more powerful than 10 minutes of anxious visualization. This is where before sleep becomes deeply personal. No one else can occupy the state for Mara. A teacher can point, a phrase can help, a practice can open the door, but the inward acceptance has to happen in the private room of consciousness. That is why the work feels simple and demanding at the same time. Simple because the movement is inward. Demanding because no outer excuse can make the movement on your behalf. The aim is not to impress the mind. The aim is to inhabit the end. In the before-sleep threshold frame, the sentence is tested in the body before it is trusted by the day. When morning comes, protect the first minute. Before the old phone, before the old story, before the old checking, remember the state. This is where overnight practice becomes day practice. If the first minute is surrendered to the old identity, the night work gets buried. If the first minute is claimed, the new state has a doorway into action. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. There will be resistance. Let resistance be part of the training. A state becomes natural not because it is chosen once, but because it is chosen when the old evidence asks for another vote. Each return is a repetition. Each repetition is a deepening. Each deepening makes the new identity less theatrical and more ordinary. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. A useful phrase is, "The old evidence is late." It belongs to the state that was practiced before. This does not mean every problem disappears. It means the present appearance may not be the final authority on the state now being occupied. You are allowed to stop letting yesterday's state define today's I am. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work: ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. If someone else is involved, do not use assumption as control. Use it as self-revision. Instead of trying to command another person's inner life, return to the state of being loved, respected, steady, and whole. From that state, communication becomes cleaner, boundaries become kinder, desire becomes less frantic. This protects the practice from becoming obsession. If money is involved, do not use assumption to avoid numbers. Open the account from the state of provision. Make the plan from the state of steadiness. Ask for help from the state of dignity. The number may be the same number, but the person looking at it is no longer the same person. That difference matters. If sleep is involved, do not drag the day into the bed like a witness against you. Let the bed become a border. Try it as a 10-second imaginal act. See one detail that would be true if the desire were already settled. Hear one ordinary sentence that would belong to the fulfilled state. Feel the body stop reaching for permission, then leave it alone for a moment. This is where many people ruin the practice. They plant the scene, then dig it up immediately to see if anything moved. The deeper discipline is to let the inner act be real enough that you do not harass it for proof. On one side is reaction. On the other side is chosen identity. The crossing may take only one breath, but if done nightly, the breath becomes a ritual of return. In the before-sleep threshold frame, the sentence is tested in the body before it is trusted by the day. If doubt is involved, do not debate for hours. Doubt feeds on endless courtrooms. Give it one answer: I have chosen the state. Then move, wash the dish, write the line. Send the message, turn off the lamp. Physical simplicity helps the mind stop circling. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. The open loop from the beginning now returns. What happens when before sleep imaginal rehearsal becomes identity rather than technique? The answer is that the practice follows you into unglamorous moments. It is there when nobody knows you are trying. It is there before sleep. It is there in the morning. It is there when evidence is late. That is when it becomes real. The final exercise is a 3-line note. Line 1, the old state says. Line 2, the fulfilled state knows. Line 3, the next action from the fulfilled state is keep it plain. If the note becomes dramatic, the old state may be performing again. Plainness is often a sign that the end is becoming natural. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work: ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. Tonight, choose the state before the world changes. Let the outside remain unfinished for a moment. Let the inner decision become complete. Let the body taste the relief of no longer waiting to be named by facts. Then take the next simple action from that relief. The world may still move through human timing, ordinary causes, and practical steps. That is fine. The question is not whether every condition obeys a fantasy deadline. The question is whether consciousness will keep abandoning itself while conditions rearrange. This episode says no. Stay with the state. For Mara, the room does not transform in a flash. The phone does not burst into proof. The number does not sing. But something more important happens first. The old authority weakens. The body realizes it can stop bowing to the scene. The soul remembers it can choose where to stand. That is the Neville lesson in its practical form. The state is not a decoration placed on top of life. It is the invisible place from which life is met. Change that place, and the next thought changes. Now carry the lesson into action. If there is a message to send, send it from steadiness. If there is a bill to handle, handle it from order. If there is a conversation to have it without bowing to the old identity first. Neville's ideas become stronger, not weaker, when they meet ordinary responsibility. The inner state is not an excuse to avoid life. It is the cause from which life is met with a different atmosphere. If the mind asks, "How long will this take?" bring it back to the actual assignment. The assignment is not to measure the calendar every 3 minutes. The assignment is to inhabit the state so faithfully that the old reaction no longer feels like home. Time becomes heavier when it is watched from lack. Time becomes lighter when it is met from assumption. That is not a promise of instant events. It is a change in the one who is waiting. The next choice changes. The next night changes. The next morning changes. The person living the pattern begins to change. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. So do not wait for the outer world to become gentle before you stop attacking yourself inwardly. Do not wait for proof before you enter dignity. Do not wait for relief before you practice relief. Enter first, assume first, revise first, rest first. Then let action proceed from the state you have chosen. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. The closing image is bedroom ceiling at 1:17 a.m., but now the atmosphere is different. The old facts may still be arranged on the surface, yet the inner room has changed furniture. Fear no longer sits in the central chair. The fulfilled self has returned. That is where the lesson begins to live. A deeper layer of identity appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat. One breath, one chosen sentence, one revised scene, one action taken without panic. This is how a state becomes believable to the body. It is not forced into belief. It is lived into familiarity. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. A deeper layer of state appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat. One breath, one chosen sentence, one revised scene, one action taken without panic. This is how a state becomes believable to the body. It is not forced into belief. It is lived into familiarity. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. A deeper layer of imagination appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes small enough to live. One breath, one inward sentence, one remembered scene, one steady action. That is how an assumption begins to feel less like effort and more like residence. It is not bullied into belief. It is made familiar through return. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. In the before-sleep threshold frame, the sentence is tested in the body before it is trusted by the day. A deeper layer of sleep appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. A second bridge. We have moved from the pressure point to the hidden sentence to the chosen state. The next question is endurance. Can the state remain yours after the first emotional wave passes? This is where carry the fulfilled state into sleep becomes more than inspiration. It becomes a private standard. You may still feel movement in the nervous system, but you no longer let that movement write the law of your identity. The practice becomes repeatable. A single breath, a sentence with authority, a revised image, and one action without panic can train the body into a new atmosphere. The state is not forced. It is visited with such loyalty that it starts to feel like home. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. A deeper layer of inner speech appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes ordinary in the best sense. One chosen sentence, one clean inner picture, one calm next step. Nothing has to be dramatic to be creative. Familiarity is built through quiet returns, and quiet returns teach the nervous system what the new identity feels like. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. A deeper layer of revision appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes intimate rather than impressive. A breath, a sentence, a scene, a clean action. These are small doors, but they open into identity. The body does not need a spectacle. It needs repeated evidence that the new state will not be abandoned. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. This is the before-sleep threshold version of the work. Ordinary pressure, inward authority, then one clean action. A deeper layer of assumption appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes a private rhythm. Notice, choose, imagine, act, then return when the old state speaks again. A fulfilled identity is not installed by force. It is accepted so consistently that the old reaction begins to feel less natural. A useful question is this: what would Mara do next if one fulfilled breath before sleep is more valuable than 20 anxious predictions? The answer should be ordinary. Maybe the next action is to sleep, reply calmly, organize the desk, pay what can be paid, prepare the conversation, or stop rehearsing disaster for one evening. The fulfilled state does not always create dramatic behavior. Often it creates clean behavior, behavior without the odor of panic. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. A deeper layer of embodiment appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat: one breath, one chosen sentence, one revised scene, one action taken without panic. This is how a state becomes believable to the body. It is not forced into belief. It is lived into familiarity. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. A deeper layer of patience appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat: a breath, a chosen sentence, a revised scene, and a steady action can be enough for the next minute. This is how the state becomes believable to the body. It is lived into familiarity, and familiarity becomes the quiet feeling of truth. There will be a moment when nothing outside has changed yet. That moment is not failure. It is the testing ground. The old habit will say, if this were real, I would already see proof. The deeper answer is quieter. If this is real within me, I can remain faithful before proof becomes visible. That is not a guarantee of a specific event on a specific deadline. It is a way of ceasing to let the absence of applause remove you from the end. In the before-sleep threshold frame, the sentence is tested in the body before it is trusted by the day. A deeper layer of action appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat: one inward return can change the quality of the next action. The body learns through repetition, not through argument. When the state is revisited with care, it begins to feel less like a method and more like truth. That detail matters here because tomorrow rehearsal is not a slogan. It is the atmosphere Mara must keep choosing. A deeper layer of receiving appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat: a single clean return matters. The mind sees the scene, the body feels the sentence, and the next action loses its panic. Over time, that ordinary rhythm becomes the way the fulfilled state proves itself inwardly. The scene at the dark bedroom makes the teaching concrete, so the soul has somewhere specific to practice it. A deeper layer of return appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat: A deeper layer of assumption appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat. One breath, one chosen sentence, one revised scene, one action taken without panic. This is how a state becomes believable to the body. It is not forced into belief. It is lived into familiarity. And familiarity, repeated with care, becomes the quiet feeling of truth. And this is the final refinement before the closing movement. She can stop letting tomorrow prosecute her before it arrives. Not loudly, not theatrically, not to impress anyone. Quietly. The old self wants a performance because performance can be abandoned when the mood changes. The assumed self wants a standard. A standard can be returned to after emotion rises, after evidence delays, after memory speaks, and after the body remembers the old story. Tonight, make the practice simple. Choose one 10-second scene that implies tomorrow has already softened. Do it without theatrical pressure. Do it as if you are remembering your natural place. Then let the body rest from argument. The final test is not whether you can feel something for 3 seconds while trying hard. The test is whether you can return, again and again, to the state that no longer needs the old world to introduce it. A deeper layer of embodiment appears when Mara stops trying to win the whole life in one dramatic moment. The practice becomes humble enough to repeat. One breath, one chosen sentence, one revised scene, one action taken. The chosen state remains the final home of the practice tonight. Before the close, return to dark room and quiet phone. See how small the original moment was. A room, a number, a phone, a mirror, a memory, a morning. Yet inside that small moment, an entire identity tried to govern the future. This is why the work is intimate. It does not begin with the whole world. It begins with the instant where the old self asks to be believed again, and the new state quietly refuses.